And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. And to set things up, as of this Tuesday late morning, we have an area of low pressure that's going to be crossing the eastern Aleutians, lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula, taking a path similar to the most recent low, and it'll end up southwest of St. Matthew by the time we get into Wednesday afternoon. And a frontal system out ahead of it will continue to push up into the Gulf. In fact, by the time we get into Wednesday evening and early Thursday morning, a weaker secondary low will form over the northern Gulf and pull back toward the eastern Kenai on Thursday morning. So that's why we find this broader area of IFR conditions over the Gulf, just off the Gulf Coast, eastern Kenai, surrounding Kodiak Island, Lower Cook Inlet, and then up also back here throughout the southwest coast, YK deltas, especially St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, down through Nunavik Island, and even west there toward St. Paul for Wednesday morning. Interior, VFR conditions will rule, MVFR across the Panhandle. For Wednesday afternoon, that front just kind of pulls up along the Gulf Coast while the low begins to take shape here, and it will be pulling back toward the west for Wednesday night into Thursday. Now, on the south end of the low that lifts up here to just southwest of St. Matthew, there could be a few embedded flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder in the showers along and south of the central Aleutians on Wednesday afternoon. Thursday morning, we find IFR conditions here across central southern portion of the Panhandle, including the inner channels. And then back out here over the central western Gulf, eastern Kenai, areas of Prince William Sound, and some of that moisture pulling up along the west arm of the Alaska Range, especially from around Rainy Pass to between there and Lake Iliamna, and then a little bit of an IFR lower ceilings and cloud cover there that are pulling back into areas of the southwest interior. And then on Thursday afternoon, we find IFR conditions along the Gulf Coast, especially there around Prince William Sound, all the way eastward into the northern Panhandle. More in the way of MVFR conditions in the interior. And another thing to note, easterly winds here along areas of the Beaufort Sea coast will cause blowing snow and some at least isolated moderate turbulence perhaps. Another low way out here to the west could bring about some IFR conditions there toward the central Aleutians, especially around and west of Adak. So past conditions on Wednesday across the Brooks Range, especially central eastern Brooks Range, VFR there at Anatuvik and Adigan passes. And as we drop down into the west side of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark, Merrill should generally hold on to IFR conditions thanks to that frontal system slowly lifting northeastward. Rainy Pass MVFR becoming IFR on Wednesday, and right now it looks like Windy Pass could hold on to VFR conditions during the day Wednesday. In areas further east along the Alaska Range, Isabel and Mentasta should remain VFR, as well as you go down south through the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass VFR. Portage Pass, we're expecting MVFR conditions throughout the length of the pass with IFR conditions further east there, especially out over Prince William Sound. And then in the northern Panhandle, Chilkoot and White will see MVFR conditions prevail on Wednesday. So where we find the freezing line, the surface freezing line, Wednesday morning, we've had temperatures at or above freezing all the way north up to places like Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, far southwest slopes, the Brooks Range. Much of the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, southwest interior, and even Anchorage saw temperatures on Monday evening jump up as high as upper 40s, low 50s with some Chinook winds that were gusting as high as 50, 60 miles an hour in town. 70 mile per hour gust as you go up the hills into the Chugach Mountains. That's settled down since then, but this was all part of with the frontal system like this, we have the warmer air ahead of it, so there's some ridging and warmer air aloft. That's made it all the way up into the interior. We find around Fairbanks, White Mountains there, freezing levels aloft above 6,000 feet. That's 4,000 foot freezing levels aloft have pushed up into the western Brooks Range, western North Slope. And as we look further south, we find freezing levels above 6,000 feet there in the vicinity of Dixon Entrance and Haida Gwaii. And where there is precipitation or clouds that are bearing precipitation, a little thicker cloud cover, there is the potential for moderate icing above 8,000 feet over the southeast part of the Gulf, southern panhandle. 6,000 feet and above there along the northern Gulf Coast back into the southwest interior. As we head up toward the Bering Strait above 4,000 feet, and also back out here in the Bering generally above 4,000 feet, the potential for some areas of moderate icing. Now the upper level jet stream pattern at 30,000 feet, we don't have any really impressive jet cores that are screaming in at 150 knots or anything like that. Relatively, for this time of year, lighter winds. We do have some general low pressure here out over the central southern portion of the Bering, and a broad area of southeast flow along the Gulf Coast, anywhere from 70-ish knots. At 700 millibars, we can kind of see at mid-levels where there's some stronger winds up here, the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, eastern Russia. There are some areas 50, 55 knots out of the southeast, and a broad southeasterly flow from areas of the northern Gulf back across the southwest interior. Meanwhile, here in the central eastern Aleutians, we have northwest flow of 50 to 55 knots, and then bringing it down to 3,000 feet, we have the one low that by Wednesday afternoon will be southwest of St. Matthew, and strongest belt of winds are south of there, anywhere from 45 to 50 knots, extending down into the eastern Aleutians. That continues into the North Pacific and then pulls back up this frontal system that's going to kind of nudge up along the Gulf Coast outer panhandle. It kind of creates a lower level barrier jet. That's why we find the winds enhanced 40 to 50 knots, especially there around Kayak Island to outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. There could be some locally stronger winds there at 3,000 feet. Also some brisk southeasterly flow on the southwest slopes of the Brooks Range, extending out toward Kivalina, out there into the lower Chukchi Sea. So as a result, we expect the greatest threat for some moderate to even isolated severe turbulence will be parts of the northern Gulf and perhaps off of the west side there of the panhandle, areas west-southwest of Sitka, surface to 6,000 feet with some low-level wind shear because of that frontal boundary lined up along the Gulf. We could still have some isolated moderate turbulence, parts of the Alaska Range, surface to 10, 12,000 feet. But the broader area of moderate turbulence will remain from the western portion of the Brooks Range and areas around Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, south across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, into the southwest interior as we go up the Yukon Valley, lower middle Yukon Valley and the Kuskokwim Valley, surface to 4,000 feet. And then we also find some areas of isolated to a more considerable moderate turbulence extending out along the length of the Alaska Peninsula back toward the central Aleutians on Wednesday, surface to 3,000 feet.